The International Nuclear Agency says Iran might be working on developing atomic weapons in its most critical report yet on the country. Its findings were widely expected and come days after Israel bluntly said military action against Iran is getting closer, raising fears the report could be a pretext to an attack. Gayana Chichikan has more on the atomic study.
The UN nuclear watchdog found no smoking gun, but hyped up fears that Iran continues research on nuclear weapons.
It doesn't say Iran is building a weapon, but it says it's collecting all the information it would need to do so and has a lot of technology.
The International Atomic Energy Agency claims to have Iranian computer models of nuclear warheads, which the watchdog views as a possible indication that Iran plans to build an atomic bomb. Among other evidence, a satellite image of a steel container that might be used to secretly test the high explosives needed to trigger a nuclear weapon.
I would be very skeptical about this report that's coming out from the International Atomic Energy Agency because the IAEA doesn't really have any intelligence capabilities of its own. And if it's relying on reports that are coming from other people, I would rather suspect those reports are coming from the United States and Israel.
The precedent of U.S. intelligence presenting false evidence to build a case for the war in Iraq raises alarm bells as to the accuracy of the Atomic Agency's latest report on Iran.
You may have a piece of evidence of some kind, but that piece of evidence is subject to your interpretation as to what it means. When they saw aerial photographs in Iraq showing certain things, they interpreted those photographs to mean something which was not correct.
Back in 2003, the U.S. was adamant its evidence on Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and terrorist activity was as solid as could be. Satellite images of a base where Saddam Hussein was believed to train al-Qaeda terrorists, evidence of mobile labs for biological weapons, aluminum tubes presented as components of centrifuges to enrich uranium. All of the above proved to be a hoax. And yet, it was enough to start a war that would last 8+ years and kill more than 100,000 civilians.
Israel is considering military action to take out Iran's nuclear facilities preemptively.
The question many now ask is, could the UN's atomic watchdog report serve as a justification to start a war with Iran? Security experts say the consequences for such action would be catastrophic.
We would most likely see new kinds of attacks, probably on Israel from Hezbollah or other groups. We'd see attacks on American troops, perhaps in Iraq and Afghanistan, even more than what we've seen so far. Iran, could retaliate in conventional terms. It could attack Saudi Arabian oil fields if you really want to see a crisis in the international economy.
Despite tough rhetoric coming from both Israel and the U.S., many agree that Washington and Tel Aviv are most likely to use the report as political leverage to try and isolate Iran and possibly to put a dent in its flourishing economic relations with China.
No one in the international community wants Iran to have nuclear weapons, but what they fear is a drastic unilateral action by Israel with the backing of the United States that could set the region on fire at a time when it is as unstable as it gets. Millions of lives could be in danger if policymakers in Washington or Tel Aviv decide to jump the gun and start a war on grounds which are far from being transparent. I'm Gayana Chichikan reporting from Washington, RT.